everybody, welcome to the very first vlog of the Virginia V's 2025 haul-out. The Steamship Virginia V is a wooden steamship built in 1922, so she's 103 years old, and she still is running and doing cruises around the Puget Sound region. Old wooden boats require a lot of maintenance. As part of keeping the ship going, she has to be hauled out every other year for inspection and maintenance, and we do that on odd-numbered years. So subscribe to the channel and keep track of our vlog posts to see the work that is being done to keep the Virginia V operating and get her ready for 2025. The first challenge is going to be getting to the shipyard. We do that under our own power without a tug assist. The Virginia V is a single-screw steamship, though, and that means she's not terribly maneuverable, especially when going backwards. Of course, the ship needs to be backed into the shipyard. You can see here from this little map, the red line shows the path that the ship is going to have to go backwards to get to the dry dock. So here we go. Fortunately, the ship is being assisted by a pusher boat from the shipyard. The pusher boat keeps pressure on the ship's bow so that the bow doesn't wander off while the ship is being backed up. Fortunately, we were quite blessed with a very calm day, so there was no wind to push the Virginia V around, and we have a very experienced captain and crew aboard the ship. So you can see back here the little gap we have to get the ship backed into. Gonna head upstairs to get a better view of the needle we are trying to thread. Alright, so back here there's a little building, and that is where the ship is headed. We just have to get around this fishing vessel, the Marahute, who is between us and the part of the dock that the ship needs to get to. And of course we're doing this all backwards. Little peek into the wheelhouse, showing you the crew at work here. The ship's steering wheel is about 5 feet in diameter, so steering it does take a little bit of upper body strength to swing that wheel around. The captain is actually leaning out the door, calling instructions to our first mate, who is at the wheel doing the steering. All right, headed back down below. We had passengers on board for this trip, getting to experience a little jaunt over to the shipyard. We've still got our pusher boat out there. And out the back, there's the fishing boat we are trying very hard not to brush against.
FYI, Captain, we have people...
No worries. Captain knows what he's doing.
Copy, thank you.
And yep, there's the little gap we're headed for. Here we go.
Oh, an elevator for boats.
See, the shipyard we're heading into is Pacific Fisherman Shipyard over in Ballard. Pacific Fisherman works on a lot of fishing boats and other commercial vessels, but also does pretty much all of the Virginia V's haul-out work, at least for the last 10 to 20 years. You might imagine it is not easy to find shipyards these days with experienced wooden shipwrights for doing work, especially on large wood boats. So we're very blessed to have Pacific Fisherman, whose carpentry shop is very familiar with the Virginia V. And a little peek into the engine room. The Virginia V is telegraph operated. That means that the throttle of the ship is actually located here on the engine. The person in the wheelhouse is just setting down orders, and then the engineers are controlling the engine. We're in reverse right now, backing up. Keeping a careful eye out for any commands from the wheelhouse. There we go, a little faster. Love to see that big engine go. And our deckhands standing by, waiting to get the ship over to the dock and tied up. We are almost there. Got a couple fenders out just so we don't damage anything when we come against the dock. And we've made it! Look at that. Excellent backup job from the captain. So the ship is going to get tied up, and then the crew will be getting the ship ready to actually be lifted out of the water. We'll disembark all of the passengers who took the cruise with us. And then one of the really important jobs is actually going to be running around and opening all of the doors on the ship. When a wooden boat is hauled up out of the water, the entire frame can flex slightly. It's because normally all of the ship's weight is being supported evenly by the water. But when she's lifted up out of the water, all of her weight is going to concentrate mostly on the keel. And the keel of the ship is designed to take that weight, but it does cause a very subtle flex in the whole boat. The flex isn't really noticeable to people looking at her or even on board, but it can cause the door frames to shift enough that doors may no longer operate correctly. And we would much rather have the doors get stuck open than get stuck shut so that we can still actually get to things. So before she's lifted out of the water, the crew has to run around the whole ship and just make sure every single door is open. Once the ship's out of the water, we can see which ones actually still close. Alright, the crew is off, the power is unplugged, and all the doors are open. Now the shipyard crew takes over, and they are very carefully walking the ship backwards to get her over the dry dock. This dry dock is a platform, and it is submerged right now, and it is blocked and ready to receive the Virginia V. The ship weighs around 200 tons, so she is not an easy boat to maneuver by hand, but these guys at the shipyard have a lot of experience moving around big boats. So with the help of a couple of ropes there, they're just very gently walking her backwards until she's positioned over the dry dock. And then once she's over at the dry dock, we've got one more important task to do before she's actually lifted out of the water, and that is to remove the ship's lifeboats. The lifeboats have to be inspected once a year. The ship has modern inflatable lifeboats because we have to meet modern Coast Guard safety standards. So here we have a crane coming over to pick up the life rafts. The ship has 2 life rafts. They are inflatable and they inflate to hold 100 people each, which means they weigh several hundred pounds apiece, which is why we need a crane to get them on and off. Once they're off the ship, they'll be sent off to a company that will unpack them, inspect them, certify them for another year, and then repack them into the capsules. And then a crane will put them back on the boat before we start operating again. We've got our shipyard crane heading to pick up the life rafts and get them off the boat and away to be inspected. There's one lifeboat. One of the ship's original lifeboats, or not original, but one of the ship's older lifeboats is actually on the roof of one of the buildings at Pacific Fisherman at this shipyard. We'll have to get a look at it in a future video. It's pretty cool to see. But the ship now has these modern inflatables for safety reasons and to abide by modern Coast Guard safety standards for carrying passengers. Alright, with the lifeboats off the ship, it is time to get her ready to lift. You see these upright little pillars on either side of the boat. They actually will squeeze together and make sure the Virginia V gets centered perfectly over the dry dock. So the shipyard crew here is going to pull the 2 pillars together and squeeze the ship between them and make sure she's precisely centered on the platform. As you can see, it was actually a pretty sunny day, despite being January, and up she goes. Now the Virginia V is out of the water and looking beautiful. She always seems so much larger up out of the water. She's sitting on her cradle here. The next task is actually going to be winching the ship off of the dry dock platform and getting her back into the tent or shed where the work will be done. So the cradle she's sitting on actually has wheels that run on tracks, and the big old winch is actually going to tow her backwards all the way into the shed. So first we have to release the uprights that were holding her in place when she was in the water. It's quite a loud process, actually. Need to look at that big, beautiful propeller. The propeller on the Virginia V is actually 6 feet in diameter, which is quite impressive. Gives the ship a fairly impressive top speed of 14 knots. Alright, it's time to get the ship ready to pull her backwards. Shipyard crew here is running a big steel cable through several blocks to get the ship ready to go. Quite a lot of cable to run with here. You can see the tracks that will tow her backwards into the shed. And there she goes. Slowly but surely. You know, I'd imagine this is about 200 tons of steamship, along with probably several thousand pounds of cradle getting towed backwards by the winch. It is a slow process, but it is actually pretty impressive to watch. Alright, she is back into her shed, and that means that it is time to start working on the boat. See, the hull is a little dirty. We keep the Virginia V in fresh water most of the year, not salt water, so the only stuff growing on her hull is really just algae that'll wash right off. No barnacles or anything. And there she is in her shed. Stay tuned for the next vlog as work begins.